Welcome back to the Echoes of Ihsan Podcast. Today we're diving deep into Sufi wisdom with The Secret of Secrets. It was written by the revered mystic Hadrat Abdul Qadir Gilani.
Yeah, a figure whose understanding of the human spirit and how it connects to the divine is still with us centuries later.
You know, it's remarkable how this book isn't just teachings. It's like woven with al-Gilani's own life story. Like it's both a guidebook, a captivating story.
It is. It's like walking with him on his path. Learning not just what he said, but his experiences, his trials, and his triumphs.
Absolutely. And the introduction is so captivating. It just paints such a vivid picture of his life. It starts with his birth during Ramadan.
Oh, and the fact that he wouldn't nurse during the day, even as an infant, says so much about how devout he was. Like his soul was attuned to the month, even then.
That's such a powerful image. And then we get to the angelic vision that called him to the path of truth.
Just imagine, a young al-Gilani gets this divine call, a clear sign his life was meant for something big, a life devoted to the divine. It set him on a course that led him to years of solitude and hardship in the deserts.
Years of solitude. Wow. It's hard to even imagine that level of dedication. What was he even looking for in all that emptiness?
Purification, mainly. Stripping away ego and attachment, quieting the noise of the world so he could hear the divine. He did some really rigorous spiritual practices, pushing himself to the limit, all to be close to Allah.
That's the core of Sufism, right? That desire to be one with the divine. And it's fascinating how he didn't just stay in isolation. He came out of the desert and went to Baghdad, the center of the Islamic world back then.
And he didn't just go there to fit in. He wanted knowledge. He engaged with, the best scholars, immersing himself in Islamic learning.
I remember reading about him and the Caliph. The Caliph was known for being skeptical about certain spiritual things.
Yes. He questioned the Prophet Muhammad ascending to heaven, like a core Islamic belief. But al-Gilani, with all his boldness, didn't back down. He presented his arguments using both traditional knowledge and his own insights.
Really shows his wisdom and faith, that he could engage even the skeptics and draw them into Islamic spirituality.
It really does, and that's what's so amazing about him. Even with people opposing him and being so rigid, his teachings connected with tons of people. Not just everyday people, but kings and scholars too.
His charisma and eloquence, along with his deep spiritual insights, had real power.
It does show the universal appeal of the Sufi message, that desire to connect with the divine. It goes beyond social barriers and intellectual differences. Okay, so leaving the biographical stuff behind, let's get into the secret of secrets. Let's start with the creation story.
All right. I'm curious to see how he tackles something so fundamental.
He starts with the Holy Spirit. In Islam, it's often called the Archangel Gabriel. It's the most perfect creation, coming straight from the divine essence.
So the Holy Spirit is like a bridge between the divine and everything created.
Yeah. It's how God's will and creative power come through. And this brings up a big question about us, the human soul, and our journey.
Okay, I'm ready. This is where things get interesting.
So the book says that the human soul was originally pure, like close to the divine. But it goes through a descent into the material world. It's going from unity to, multiplicity, from pure spirit into the world of form.
Kind of like a fall from grace, right?
Yeah.
But with a chance to return.
Exactly. The whole point of being here, according to al-Gilani, is to deal with this complex world, but to also try to return to our spiritual home. It's going back to that unity, that closeness with the divine.
Sounds like a big balancing act. Engaging with the world, but staying detached. Reaching for the divine while living in the material realm.
That's it. And to guide us on this tricky journey, he talks about where the soul lives in the body.
Ah, this is where those subtle esoteric teachings come into play, right?
The heart, not the physical one, but the spiritual center, is where the soul mainly lives. It's where intuition comes from, where divine light shows up, the compass that points us back home.
Like a hidden room inside us, waiting to be opened and lit up.
And it's not just the heart. He talks about 7 centers in the body. Each one's connected to different parts of the soul's journey, reflecting the stages of spiritual ascent. Sufis call these centers lataif.
So it's like an inner map, a guide to our spiritual anatomy.
Exactly. This inner reality mirrors the outer world. It helps us understand how our inner changes show up in what we do and experience. As we refine these subtle centers, our view of the world changes and our actions line up more with God's will.
So fascinating. It connects the inner and outer, the spiritual and the material.
That's it. And this leads us to another big theme in The Secret of Secrets, knowledge and repentance, how they work together.
Let's explore that.
Al-Gilani says there are 2 types of knowledge. One's the knowledge of things. We get that from observing and studying the world around us. The other's the knowledge of the self. That comes from looking inside and understanding our inner reality.
So it's not just about knowing facts, but also about that inner knowing, that deep understanding of our hearts and souls.
Exactly. He really stresses that truly understanding the Quran comes from getting both its outer meanings, the words and laws, and its inner depths, the spiritual truths it points to.
It's like reading between the lines, unlocking the hidden wisdom.
And that inner knowledge, the knowledge of the self, is what unlocks the Quran's transformative power so we can apply it to our lives.
So it's a journey from intellectual understanding to actually living it spiritually. How does repentance fit into all of this?
He goes deep into repentance, describing its stages, from admitting our flaws to actively turning away from bad actions and making up for past mistakes. It all leads to truly turning towards Allah and living our lives according to His will. He emphasizes that true repentance isn't just feeling bad, but a genuine change of heart.
So it's not just guilt, but actually changing course, purifying our intentions and getting back in line with the divine.
Exactly. It's always refining ourselves, shedding those layers that keep us from experiencing the fullness of divine love and mercy. It's like polishing that mirror of the heart, removing the negativity so the light of truth can shine through.
That's a powerful image. This leads us to the core of the Sufi path, something that al-Gilani describes so well.
He explains the word Sufi itself and its deep meaning hidden in its 4 letters.
This is where the beautiful language and symbolism of the tradition come in, right? I love how Sufi teachings have these layers of meaning.
Each letter of Sufi means something important: repentance, sincerity, purity, and the path. These 4 things are the essence of Sufism, that journey of interchange and rising spiritually.
So it's like a roadmap within the word itself.
And he really emphasizes that the Sufi path is a gradual journey with stages, each one needing dedication, effort, and a qualified teacher, someone to light the way and help avoid the pitfalls.
Like having a spiritual guide, a mentor who's been there and can keep you from getting lost.
Exactly. And the book highlights practices that are essential: remembrance, seclusion, solitude, and charity.
Each one having its own role in this journey of inner transformation.
Exactly. Each one is there to help purify the heart, quiet the mind, and deepen the connection with Allah, stripping away the things that separate us from the divine.
So let's dive into some of these practices. Let's start with remembrance, or dhikr. It seems central to Sufi practice.
Dhikr is remembering Allah through certain words and phrases. It can quiet the mind, soften the heart, and bring you closer to the divine.
But it's more than just repeating words without thinking, right?
Of course. Al-Gilani says true remembrance needs certain things. You need a pure heart, sincere intentions, and a focus on the divine. It's about putting your heart into those words, letting them sink in, and awaken that remembrance of Allah already inside you.
So it's about aligning yourself internally and externally, using words to be present and deepen the connection.
Yes, and he talks about levels of remembrance, each level leading to deeper spiritual truths being revealed. It starts with reciting words and moves to experiencing divine light in your heart, a gradual awakening to Allah's presence in every moment.
It's like climbing a ladder, each rung taking you closer to that ultimate union with the divine.
And that brings us to the ultimate goal of the Sufi path: seeing Allah.
And that's where things get truly mystical. What does al-Gilani say about this vision?
He says it can happen in 2 ways. One is seeing the manifestation of his qualities in the world around us, in nature, kindness, harmony, The other is directly through the heart, a direct unveiling of the divine without any form.
So one's through our physical eyes and the other's through the eye of the heart.
Right. And he talks about veils, both light and dark, that block this vision.
Veils. What do those stand for?
The dark veils represent our ego, our worldly attachments, our bad qualities, our limiting beliefs, all that keeps us from feeling connected. The light veils, on the other hand, represent spiritual stations, states of nearness to Allah, glimpses of divine beauty that uplift us.
So it's about removing the dark veils and getting through the light veils to reach that vision of divine unity.
Exactly. It's a journey of refining ourselves, cleansing our hearts, and living by God's will.
A continuous unveiling and purification.
And this purification isn't just internal. It shows up in what we do, the choices we make, how we interact with the world.
That's where the ethical side of Sufism comes in, right?
Exactly. Al-Gilani talks about what happens because of our actions, both here and in the afterlife. He makes it clear there's a difference between those who choose good and those who rebel.
So there's accountability on the Sufi path. Our actions have consequences for us and others.
Right. He talks about divine justice, how our choices affect not only us, but also the world around us.
It adds a sense of urgency to the spiritual path, a reminder that our choices matter.
He doesn't sugarcoat the misery waiting for those who reject the divine call. Choosing darkness over light, selfishness over service, illusion over truth. But it's not to scare us, but to wake us up to how important it is to choose the path to lasting peace, joy, and fulfillment. He wants us to see that rebelling, separating ourselves from the divine, ultimately leads to suffering.
It's a call to see the truth about our choices and their impact, both on ourselves and everyone around us.
And that leads to a fascinating group who really embodies the Sufi path, the dervishes.
Ah, yes, the whirling dervishes are probably the most well-known image of Sufism. But what exactly is a dervish?
Al-Gilani tells us about their traits and practices. They are dedicated to seeking Allah, detached from worldly stuff, and committed to the divine qualities of love, compassion, and service.
So it's not just about the outward stuff like whirling, but a deep inner change, making the divine the focus of their hearts.
Exactly. A true dervish is filled with love for Allah. Their heart overflows with longing for the divine. Everything they do, every breath, is an act of remembrance and devotion.
I've read that al-Jilani uses colors to represent dervishes. What do the colors mean?
Each color represents a specific spiritual state or level of purification. It's like a secret language that shows the soul's journey towards being one with Allah. For example, black means the beginning of repentance, white symbolizes purity and surrender, green means growth and spiritual qualities blossoming, and red represents that burning love for the divine.
So it's like a visual guide of the soul's journey, each color marking a stage on the path.
And something important that comes up in his description of a dervish is poverty, both materially and spiritually.
Poverty, how does that fit in?
True poverty, the way Sufis understand it, isn't about not having things. It's about being detached from everything except Allah. It's about surrendering the ego's desires, realizing that true wealth is being close to the divine, that abundance of love, grace, and wisdom coming from the source.
It's about shifting our focus from temporary treasures to the eternal treasures of the spirit.
And that brings us to purification, something al-Jilani stresses on both the outer and inner levels.
Purification seems to be a key idea in The Secret of Secrets.
It's the foundation of the Sufi path. Outer purification is about cleansing the body and senses, doing the Islamic rituals like prayer and fasting, and acting righteously, living out those divine qualities in the world.
So it's about matching our actions with our inner goals.
Right. And along with outer purification, there's the crucial inner work, the purification of the heart.
What does that involve?
It means refining your character, getting rid of things like envy, arrogance, and greed, and developing virtues like love, compassion, humility, generosity, and gratitude.
So it's about transforming our inner landscape, making our hearts fertile for divine qualities to grow.
Al-Jilani connects the outer and inner parts of worship beautifully. He explains the deeper meaning behind the 5 daily prayers and other Islamic practices.
He sees those outer actions as a way to transform internally.
Exactly. He shows how these outward acts of worship can cultivate inner awareness and keep us connected to the divine. It's about being present and devoted during those rituals, making them doorways to deeper states of consciousness.
It's about going beyond just the motions and really experiencing the heart of the practice.
He introduces the idea of true worship, which comes from the heart and includes everything in life, turning every action into an act of devotion. It's about living in constant remembrance, recognizing the divine presence in every moment, in every interaction, in every breath.
So it's about living the spirit of worship not just at specific times, but always.
And this leads to the perfect man, a being who's totally pure, detached from worldly things, whose heart only reflects the divine attributes.
That sounds like a high ideal. Is it even possible?
Al-Jilani doesn't say it's impossible. He says it's a potential inside every human waiting to be awakened through spiritual refinement. It's about realizing the divine spark already within us.
So it's about revealing our true nature, who we really are under all the layers and illusions.
And to get there, you have to purify your heart until it's a clear mirror, reflecting only divine qualities.
It's a constant process of polishing that mirror, removing the negativity and ego, letting the truth shine through unobstructed.
And this purification isn't just a solo mission. Al-Jilani talks about community, supporting and encouraging each other along the way.
So the Sufi path isn't about isolating yourself, but about engaging with the world with a pure heart, a spirit of service and compassion.
Exactly. It's about bringing the light of your inner transformation out into the world, spreading love, wisdom, and peace.
It's about embodying those divine qualities in everything we do, our relationships, and how we contribute to society.
Right. And that brings us to the power of giving, which al-Jilani talks about in detail. He distinguishes between two kinds, prescribed and spiritual.
Okay, let's break that down.
Prescribed charity is like zakat in Islam. It's one of the pillars of faith, giving a part of your wealth to those in need. It's a way to make sure resources are shared and everyone's basic needs are met.
It's a beautiful example of social justice in Islam.
It is. But al-Jilani goes deeper, reminding us that spiritual charity goes beyond just material giving. It's all about kindness, generosity, and compassion. Every action that helps and supports others. Every word that heals and inspires.
It's about being generous in everything we do, recognizing that we're all connected and helping wherever we can.
Yes. And he describes the impact of giving so beautifully. It helps the receiver, obviously, but it also purifies the giver's heart.
It's a two-way street. It benefits both sides.
True giving isn't about getting recognition or reward. It's a spontaneous overflowing of the heart, a reflection of divine generosity. It's about being a channel for divine grace, letting that love and compassion flow through us and touch other people's lives.
It's about being an instrument of divine mercy in the world.
And finally, we get to fasting, which al-Jilani explores on both physical and spiritual levels.
Fasting is another practice that seems to connect the inner and outer, the physical and the spiritual.
Exactly. Physical fasting is not eating or drinking. Many spiritual traditions do this. Spiritual fasting is abstaining from bad thoughts, desires, and actions.
So it's about disciplining not just the body, but the mind and heart too. It's like a spiritual detox, cleansing for both body and soul. And he really emphasizes how fasting creates a deeper connection with Allah. Why is that?
Because when you remove the distractions of the material world, when you intentionally create that emptiness, you make space for spiritual nourishment. Fasting breaks our reliance on the physical, allowing us to experience sustenance from the divine source, the nourishment that feeds the soul.
So it's about letting go, surrendering our reliance on things outside of us, and opening ourselves to sustenance from within, from the divine.
And then there's the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, the holiest place in Islam. Al-Jilani beautifully reveals its inner and outer dimensions, showing how the outer journey mirrors the inner pilgrimage of the soul.
It's fascinating how he links a physical trip to a spiritual one. What insights does he offer?
The outer journey, with all its rituals and symbols, is a powerful way of acting out the inner journey everyone on a spiritual path takes. Each part of the Hajj has a deeper meaning, reflecting a step in our spiritual growth. Like wearing the ihram, those simple white garments. It represents letting go of worldly attachments and standing before Allah with complete humility, no pretense or status.
It's such a powerful image of equality and surrender. Everyone in the same simple clothes, standing before the divine.
And circling the Kaaba, that cube-shaped structure at the center of the Grand Mosque, represents our constant remembrance of the divine center, circling around the axis of truth, the focus of our devotion.
It's a physical representation of that desire to revolve around the divine, to make Allah the center of our lives.
And standing at Arafat, a plain near Mecca, asking for Allah's forgiveness, is the peak of the journey. A moment of vulnerability and surrender, pouring your heart out before the divine. Al-Jilani so beautifully explains how this outer pilgrimage mirrors the journey to the divine within our hearts. It's about purification, letting go of the ego, realizing we depend on the divine, and finally returning to unity with Allah.
It's like a map for the soul, guiding us back to where we came from, to that oneness we crave.
And on this journey, there are moments of amazing spiritual unveiling, moments when things become clear and we get a taste of that union, a glimpse of the divine reality in everything. Al-Jilani calls this ecstasy.
Now we're talking mystical experience.
But he's careful to say it's not just emotional excitement or fleeting happiness. True ecstasy, the way he describes it, is a state of heightened spiritual awareness, a taste of divine union, feeling your heart overflowing with love and gratitude.
So it's not about seeking temporary highs, but about having a pure heart and being open so that these glimpses of divine reality can happen.
Right. It's about purifying the heart, letting go of the ego, and aligning ourselves with the divine will. And he talks about different types of ecstasy, both physical and spiritual, and how they affect us.
What are some of those ways it shows up?
Sometimes you feel it physically, like
Okay.
trembling or swaying, your body responding to that divine energy. Other times it's intense feelings of love, longing, or awe. Your heart expands to hold all of that divine love.
Wow, it sounds incredibly powerful.
But the core of it is that it comes from a pure heart, overflowing with love for Allah, leading to a blissful union and deep inner peace.
So it's not something we can force, but a gift given to a heart that's ready.
Exactly. And to cultivate this connection, to be open to these moments of grace, al-Gilani says it's important to withdraw from the world a bit, to create space for silence, solitude, and looking inward.
This is where seclusion and solitude come in, right?
Yeah.
Creating that space for deeper spiritual practice and connection with the divine.
That's it. Seclusion is about physically removing yourself from distractions, creating a sacred space to focus on your spiritual practice. You could go to a quiet room, spend time in nature, or even go on a pilgrimage. It's about intentionally creating a container for your practice, stepping away from the constant demands of everyday life.
Like hitting the pause button on the external world so you can tune into your inner world.
And solitude is different. It's about that inner detachment, that inner stillness, even when life is busy. It's about learning to detach from the constant thoughts, emotions, and desires that pull us in all directions, cultivating inner quietude where we can connect with the divine presence inside us.
So it's not about physical isolation, but about having an inner sanctuary that you take with you.
It's about finding that stillness while everything's moving, that peace in the chaos, that connection to the divine, even when you're doing everyday things.
It's like carrying that inner sanctuary with you, finding that stillness, even in the chaos. And al-Gilani offers specific prayers and recitations for people who are seeking these states of retreat.
Those practices are designed to call upon divine protection and guidance, strengthen your resolve, and show you the way forward.
It's like he's giving us a spiritual toolkit, practices that can help us cultivate inner peace and connection.
They're a support system, helping us deal with the challenges and temptations that come up on the spiritual path.
So they're not just about escaping the world, but about preparing ourselves to go back into the world with more wisdom, compassion, and clarity.
Exactly. And his explanation of the benefits of these practices is fascinating. It's not about running away from the world, but about going back to it feeling refreshed and recharged with a clear sense of purpose, clarity, and compassion.
Like going on a spiritual retreat and coming back to the world with a new perspective, a deeper understanding of yourself and your purpose.
Right. And in this section on seclusion and solitude, I found his discussion of dreams really interesting.
Oh, dreams. That's a fascinating topic. What does al-Gilani say about them?
He says dreams can be really insightful. They can be messages from the divine, giving us wisdom, direction, and warnings.
So he doesn't think they're just random stuff our brains make up while we sleep.
Definitely not. He thinks dreams can show us the hidden dimensions of reality, a way to access knowledge that's beyond our rational minds. They can reveal hidden truths about ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us, and they can guide us on our spiritual path, pointing us toward our full potential.
But he's also careful to say that not all dreams are the same, right? Some are just our thoughts and feelings, while others have a deeper spiritual meaning.
Exactly. He says dreams can come from different sources, including Allah, the Prophet Muhammad, and even the devil.
So we need to be careful to learn how to tell the difference between these types of dreams.
Yes. He gives us a framework for interpreting dream symbols, telling us to carefully figure out the message and where it's coming from.
It's like learning a new language. The language of the soul, the language of symbols and metaphors.
It is. And he even shares some fascinating examples of dreams that he and his followers have had.
I love how Sufi teachings often use these personal stories. They make the teachings come alive. They show how these principles worked out in real life.
Those stories give us a glimpse into how dreams can reveal hidden truths, warn us, guide us, and even tell us about what might happen in the future.
It's like a window into how the unseen realms work. A reminder that there's more to reality than what we can see.
And it's important to note that al-Gilani doesn't shy away from talking about the challenges people face on the spiritual path.
Right. It's not all beautiful visions and mystical experiences. It takes a lot of inner work, facing our dark sides and overcoming obstacles.
Exactly. The path to Allah isn't always easy. There are temptations, doubts, trials, and really tough times that test how strong we are. Times when we might feel lost, discouraged, or just overwhelmed. The ego doesn't give up easily, and the world is full of things that can distract us.
So being resilient and persevering are really important qualities on this path. We have to remember why we started this journey, that longing for connection with the divine, that desire for spiritual growth and transformation.
Absolutely. And when things get tough, he says to remember to persevere, be sincere, and trust completely in Allah's guidance.
It's about remembering we're not alone on this path, that we have divine support every step of the way. We might trip and fall, but we can always get back up and keep going.
And it's a reminder that the journey itself changes us. Even the struggles make us grow spiritually. They help us develop patience, humility, and surrender.
So the challenges aren't there to break us, but to refine us, to polish that mirror of the heart. They're chances to strengthen our resolve, to rely more on the divine, and to come out even stronger and brighter.
Before we move on, I want to talk about something that I found interesting. Al-Gilani's discussion of the different groups that follow the mystical path.
Right. He recognizes that there are various ways to approach Sufism, different schools of thought and ways of practicing. He doesn't say it's a one-size-fits-all path. It's more like a diverse landscape with lots of approaches, each with its own emphasis and methods.
He acknowledges the diversity of approaches and beliefs, highlighting various Sufi orders and their practices.
So it's not a single rigid tradition, but a rich mix of different views and ways of doing things. It's like a garden full of different flowers, each beautiful and fragrant in its own way.
That's a great analogy. But what's really important is his emphasis on discernment. We need to find authentic teachers, people who really understand the tradition and embody the true spirit of Sufism, and we need to stay grounded in the basic principles of Islam.
So it's about finding a path that's both true to the tradition and speaks to our hearts. We need to think critically, we need to evaluate the teachings and practices we come across, and make sure they align with the core of Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah.
Exactly. He warns us about blindly following someone, about being swept up by charisma or outward appearances. He stresses how important it is to make sure your spiritual practices line up with the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet Muhammad's example.
So it's about finding that balance between the inner and outer, the esoteric and exoteric, the mystical and the traditional. It's about integrating the spiritual practices into the framework of Islamic beliefs and principles, making sure that our spiritual journey is built on solid ground.
Right, because in the end, it's all about being closer to Allah, not getting lost in rituals or being blindly loyal to a specific group or teacher.
It's about finding a path that leads to true spiritual change, not just temporary experiences or empty rituals. It's about living out the core of the teachings, not just copying what we see.
And this part really shows how important it is to learn and get guidance from people who are deeply rooted in the Islamic tradition. They can help us navigate the complicated spiritual path and avoid going astray. It's about finding teachers who can show us the truth, who can help us uncover the light already inside our hearts.
It's a reminder that we don't have to figure this out on our own. There are teachers, guides, and communities that can help us on our journey. They offer wisdom, guidance, and companionship along the way. It's so interesting how al-Gilani doesn't just talk about these big ideas. He actually gives us practical things we can do to develop those qualities in ourselves.
He does. The Secret of Secrets is full of practical advice, specific practices, and examples that make these abstract principles something we can actually experience.
And one of the practices that really stuck with me was his focus on the two types of charity, the prescribed and the spiritual.
Yeah. He talks about fulfilling both our outer obligations and our inner desires.
So it's not just about doing the ritual, but living that spirit of giving, extending it beyond just those specific practices.
Prescribed charity, like zakat, is like a fundamental part of Islam. It's about doing our duty to help those who need it, making sure everyone has what they need to live.
It's such a beautiful system. It's meant to create balance in society, keep wealth from being concentrated in the hands of a few, and ensure the community is taken care of.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual safety net. But al-Gilani goes deeper than that. He says that spiritual charity goes beyond just giving material things. It's about being generous and compassionate in every interaction, in how we talk to people, how we treat them, how we respond to their needs, both material and emotional.
It's about shifting from just doing it because we have to wanting to do it, from obligation to love.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how he links charity to purification. It's not just the act of giving, but the inner transformation that comes with it.
So how does giving actually purify the heart?
It's like polishing that mirror we were talking about. The more we give selflessly, the less attached we are to possessions and that feeling of separateness. And the more the divine light shines through.
It's like we're creating space inside for divine grace to flow through us.
Acts of charity, whether material or spiritual, dissolve the ego, soften the heart, and awaken compassion and empathy. They connect us to everything, reminding us that we're all connected and share our humanity.
It's such a beautiful reminder that giving doesn't leave us empty, it actually fills us up. The more we give, the more we receive. Maybe not material things, but spiritual growth, inner peace, and connection to the divine.
Right. Now, let's talk about another powerful practice al-Gilani talks about, Fasting. He looks at both the physical and spiritual sides of it, showing how they work together to purify us on so many levels.
I love how he says it's not just about not eating or drinking, it's also about getting rid of negative thoughts, desires, and actions.
Yeah.
It's like self-discipline for your whole being.
That's it. It's about disciplining that lower self, those impulses and desires that keep us stuck in the material world, so that the higher self can come out, the part of us that's connected to the divine, the part that wants truth, beauty, and goodness.
It's like a spiritual detox, cleansing the body and the soul. We're choosing to be without on the physical level to cultivate abundance on the spiritual level.
And he really focuses on how fasting strengthens our connection with Allah. Why? Because when we get rid of the distractions, when we intentionally create that emptiness, it makes room for spiritual nourishment. Fasting breaks us free from depending on the physical world and lets us experience the sustenance that comes from the divine source, the kind that feeds the soul. It reminds us that true sustenance doesn't come from what we eat, but from the divine grace that flows through us.
So it's about letting go, surrendering our reliance on outside things and opening up to the sustenance that's already inside from the divine. And it's also about appreciating what we have. When we're hungry, we really appreciate food. When we're thirsty, we appreciate water.
Fasting helps us see the world differently, to be grateful for the blessings we often take for granted. And it makes us understand how people who don't have enough, who are hungry and thirsty every day, feel.
It's a practice that brings us closer to the divine and to each other. And of course, there's the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Makkah, the most sacred place in Islam. Al-Gilani so beautifully shows how the outer journey reflects the inner pilgrimage of the soul.
The Hajj is such a deep ritual, full of symbols and meaning. It's a journey back to the roots of Islam, following the steps of the Prophet Abraham and his family, reliving their challenges and triumphs, and surrendering to God's will.
It's amazing how he links a physical journey to a spiritual one. What are some of the insights he gives?
The outward journey, with its rituals and symbols, is a powerful way to act out the inner journey we all go through. Each stage of the Hajj has a deeper meaning, reflecting a step in our spiritual development. It's a journey of letting go, shedding layers of ego and attachment, returning to a state of purity and surrender.
So it's not just a physical trip, but a transformation of how we see the world, shedding the old self and embracing the new.
Yeah, like wearing the Ihram, those plain white clothes. It symbolizes letting go of worldly things and being humble before Allah. No showing off, no status. Everyone, rich or poor from any background, wears the same simple outfit. It shows how equal we are in the eyes of God.
It's a strong image of equality and surrender. It reminds us that we're all equal to God.
And circling the Kaaba, the cube-shaped building in the middle of the Grand Mosque, represents constantly remembering the divine center, circling around truth, the focus of our devotion. We go around the Kaaba 7 times, a number that means completeness and perfection in Islam.
It's like physically acting out that desire to revolve around the divine, to make Allah the center of everything we do. And the fact that millions of people from all over the world are doing this together, creating this huge, swirling crowd, all focused on devotion, is incredibly powerful.
It really is. It reminds us that the search for spirituality is universal. It's about the human heart wanting to connect with the divine, and it goes beyond culture and borders. And then they're standing at Arafat, that plain near Mecca, asking Allah for forgiveness. It's the culmination of the Hajj, a moment of complete vulnerability and surrender, pouring out your heart to the divine.
It's a day of deep prayer, reflection, and asking for what you need. A time to let go of past mistakes, ask forgiveness for our shortcomings, and renew our commitment to serving and devoting ourselves to Allah.
Al-Gilani beautifully explains how this outward pilgrimage mirrors the journey to the divine within us. It's about purification, letting go of the ego, realizing we depend on the divine, and finally returning to unity with Allah.
It reminds us that the real journey isn't to a physical place, but to the depths of our own hearts, to the place where the divine lives.
Exactly. And along the way, we experience moments when things become clear, when the veils lift, and we taste that unity, that glimpse of divine reality in everything. Al-Gilani calls this ecstasy.
Ecstasy. Now we're in the world of mystical experience. What does he say about these heightened states of awareness?
He describes it as feeling deep joy, bliss, and oneness with the divine. It's when the boundaries of the self disappear and we feel one with everything. But he's careful to say it's not just emotional excitement or temporary happiness. True ecstasy, he says, is a state of heightened spiritual awareness, a taste of divine union, an overflowing heart full of love and gratitude.
So it's not about chasing after temporary highs or looking for those ecstatic experiences, but about purifying our hearts, being open, and letting those glimpses of divine reality happen naturally.
It's about purifying the heart, letting go of the ego, and surrendering to the will of the divine. He describes different types of ecstasy, both physical and spiritual, and how they affect us differently.
What are some of those ways it shows up?
Sometimes it's physical, like trembling or swaying, the body responding to that influx of divine energy. Other times, it's intense feelings like love, longing, or awe. The heart expands to hold all that divine love. And sometimes it's about profound insights, sudden clarity, or deep knowing that goes beyond the rational mind.
It sounds incredibly powerful, a truly transformative experience.
It is, but at its core, it comes from a pure heart, overflowing with love for Allah. It leads to a blissful union and deep inner peace. It's a gift. It's grace that comes to a prepared heart. It can't be forced.
So it's about creating the right conditions, purifying the heart, letting go of the ego, and then being open to those experiences, recognizing that they're ultimately gifts from the divine.
Exactly, and to cultivate that connection, to be ready for those moments of grace, al-Gilani emphasizes withdrawing from the world a little, creating space for silence, solitude, and looking inward.
That's where those practices of seclusion and solitude come in,
Right.
creating that space for deeper spiritual practice and connecting with the divine.
Yes. Seclusion is about physically removing yourself from all those distractions, creating a sacred space just for your spiritual practice. You might go to a quiet room, spend time in nature, or even go on a pilgrimage. It's about intentionally making space for your practice, taking a break from the constant demands of everyday life.
Like hitting the pause button on the world so you can tune into your inner world.
And solitude is different. It's about that inner detachment, that inner peace, even in the middle of a busy life. It's about learning to separate yourself from the constant stream of thoughts, emotions, and desires that pull us in every direction. It's about creating inner quiet so you can connect with the divine within.
So it's not about being physically alone, but about having that inner sanctuary wherever you go.
It's about finding stillness while everything is moving, peace in the chaos, connecting with the divine even when you're doing ordinary things.
It's like taking that inner sanctuary with you everywhere, finding that stillness in the chaos. And al-Gilani gives specific prayers and recitations for people who are searching for these states of retreat.
Those practices are designed to ask for divine protection and guidance, to make your resolve stronger, and to light the path ahead.
It's like he's giving us a spiritual toolkit, practices that can help us develop inner peace and connection.
They're there to support us, to help us handle the challenges and temptations that come up on this path.
So they're not about running away from the world, but about preparing us to go back into the world with more wisdom, more compassion, and more clarity.
Exactly. And the way he explains the benefits of these practices is so interesting. It's not about escaping the world, but coming back to it feeling refreshed and recharged, with a renewed sense of purpose, clarity, and compassion.
It's like going on a spiritual retreat and returning to the world with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
You understand yourself and your purpose better.
That's a good way to put it. And in this part about seclusion and solitude, I found his discussion on dreams really interesting.
Dreams. That's always fascinating. What does he say about them?
He believes dreams can be really powerful. They can be messages from the divine, giving us wisdom, guidance, and warnings.
So he doesn't think they're just our brains making things up while we sleep.
Not at all. He believes dreams can show us hidden parts of reality. They can be a way to access knowledge that's beyond our rational minds. They can reveal truths about ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us. They can guide us on our spiritual path and show us our potential.
But he also says not all dreams are equal, right? Some are just leftover thoughts and feelings, while others have a deeper spiritual meaning.
Yes, he says dreams can come from different places, like Allah, the Prophet Muhammad, and even the devil.
So we need to be careful and learn how to tell the difference between these types of dreams.
That's right. He gives us a way to interpret dream symbols and says we have to carefully understand the message and its source.
Like learning a whole new language, the language of the soul, the language of symbols and metaphors.
It is. And he even shares some interesting examples of dreams he and his followers had.
I love that Sufi teachings often use personal stories like that. It makes the teachings come alive, It shows how these principles actually work in real life.
They do. Those stories give us a glimpse into how dreams can reveal hidden truths, warn us about things, guide us on our path, and even tell us about things that might happen in the future.
It's like looking through a window into the unseen world. It reminds us there's so much more to reality than we can see.
And it's important to remember that al-Gilani doesn't avoid talking about the challenges that people face on the spiritual path.
Right. It's not all blissful visions and mystical experiences. It takes a lot of inner work. We have to face our shadows and overcome obstacles.
The path to Allah isn't always smooth. There are temptations, doubts, trials, and tough times that test us. Times when we might feel lost, discouraged, or just plain overwhelmed. The ego doesn't just disappear, and the world is full of distractions.
So we need to be resilient and determined. We have to remember why we started this journey in the first place. That yearning for connection with the divine, that desire to grow spiritually and transform.
Absolutely. And in those tough times, he says to remember to persevere, be sincere, and have complete trust in Allah's guidance.
It's about remembering that we're not alone on this journey, that we have divine support every step of the way. We might stumble, but we can always get back up and keep moving forward.
It's also a reminder that the journey itself is transformative. Even the struggles help us grow spiritually. They help us develop patience, humility, and surrender.
So the challenges aren't meant to break us. They're there to refine us, to polish that mirror of the heart. They're chances to become stronger in our resolve, to depend more on the divine, and to come out even stronger and more radiant.
Now, before we move on, I want to mention something that really stood out to me. Al-Gilani's discussion about different groups that follow the mystical path.
Right. He acknowledges that there are different ways of approaching Sufism, different schools of thought and ways of practicing. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's a diverse landscape with many different paths, each with its own focus and methods.
He recognizes that there are many different approaches and beliefs. He points out different Sufi orders and their practices.
So it's not a rigid, uniform tradition. It's more like a tapestry woven with different perspectives and approaches, like a garden with all kinds of flowers, each beautiful and fragrant in its own unique way.
That's a great way to describe it. But he stresses the importance of discernment, finding authentic teachers, people who truly understand the tradition and live the true spirit of Sufism, and staying grounded in the basic principles of Islam.
So it's about finding a path that's both true to the tradition and feels right in our hearts. We have to be critical thinkers, evaluate the teachings and practices we encounter, and make sure they align with the core of Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah.
He warns us against blindly following someone, being swept up by charisma, or focusing only on outward appearances. He emphasizes aligning our spiritual practices with the Quran and Sunnah, the Prophet Muhammad's example.
So it's about balancing the inner and outer, the esoteric and exoteric, the mystical and the traditional. It's about integrating our spiritual practices into a framework of Islamic beliefs and principles, making sure our spiritual journey has a strong foundation.
That's the key. Because ultimately, the goal is to get closer to Allah, not to get lost in rituals or blindly follow a specific group or teacher.
It's about finding a path that leads to real spiritual transformation, not just temporary experiences or empty rituals. It's about embodying the true meaning of the teachings, not just imitating what we see.
And this section highlights how important it is to seek knowledge and guidance from people who are deeply rooted in the Islamic tradition, people who can help us navigate this complex spiritual path and avoid going astray. It's about finding teachers who can point us towards the truth, who can help us uncover the light that's already within our hearts.
It's a reminder that we don't have to do this alone. There are teachers, guides, and communities that can support us. They offer their wisdom, guidance, and companionship. This deep dive into the secret of secrets has been amazing. It's like we found this hidden treasure chest of wisdom, full of insights into reality, the human heart, and the path back to the divine.
It really is. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Insights that are just as powerful today as they were centuries ago. Timeless wisdom that speaks to what we all long for.
I totally agree. And, as we've been talking about these ideas, I keep thinking about how they apply to us. Like, it's one thing to get the concepts, but it's another thing to actually live them out, to make them part of our everyday lives.
Right. That's what makes this book so special. It's not just meant to be admired, but to be lived, woven into our lives, changing how we think, what we say, and what we do.
Yeah, it's about bridging that gap between theory and practice, between knowledge and action. So, if someone's listening and feeling inspired to start their own journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth, where would you suggest they start? What are some practical steps they can take to put these teachings into action?
Al-Gilani himself says it's important to find a good teacher, someone who's walked the path, who embodies these teachings, and can guide and support you along the way.
Like having an experienced guide, a spiritual mentor who can help you navigate all the twists and turns, someone who can point out the pitfalls and encourage you when things get rough.
Exactly. A teacher can help us understand the teachings more deeply, clear up any confusion, give us advice tailored to our specific needs and challenges, and be there to support and keep us accountable. But besides seeking guidance from others, there's also the important inner work of self-reflection and purification. That's something we have to do ourselves. No one else can do it for us.
It's about taking responsibility for our own spiritual growth, developing that inner awareness, and making a choice to align our thoughts, words, and actions with what God wants. It all starts with al-Gilani's powerful metaphor of the heart as a polished mirror.
He tells us to wipe away all the dust that's built up, all the conditioning, negative pattern, limiting beliefs, attachments, all the things that cloud our true selves and block the divine light within.
So it's about developing inner clarity, that purity of heart that lets those divine qualities shine through.
And this cleansing isn't just about thinking, it's also about doing. Aligning our thoughts, words, and actions with Islamic principles. Living out those divine qualities in our daily life.
So it's about living by our values, making choices that reflect our deepest desires, and striving to be our best selves.
It's about having that inner consistency where our outer lives reflect the purity and beauty inside us.
So it's not about suppressing or denying our humanness, but about refining and elevating it, aligning it with the divine. And we shouldn't forget the power of community. Al-Gilani shows how important it is to have the support and inspiration from other people who are on the same path.
Being surrounded by people who share your aspirations, who understand the joys and challenges, who can encourage and lift you up, is so valuable.
It's like having a spiritual family, a tribe of like-minded souls walking the path together, supporting each other, celebrating each other's successes, and comforting and encouraging each other when times are tough.
Like a caravan traveling through the desert. Everyone helps each other along the way, sharing resources, keeping each other on track, and offering support when the journey gets hard.
Yeah. It reminds us that we're all in this together. We're not alone. We're connected, and we can help each other on this path. And don't forget the power of consistent practice. Whether it's dhikr, remembering the divine through words and phrases, praying with intention, doing acts of charity and service, or anything else that connects us to the divine, consistency is essential.
It's about showing up every day, making those small choices, taking those small steps that gradually lead to change. It's not about being perfect, it's about making progress.
It's about making those practices a rhythm in our lives, making them part of our daily routine, weaving them into our existence.
It's about making those spiritual practices a part of who we are, not just rituals, but expressions of our love and yearning for Allah.
So they become less about what we have to do and more about devotion, less about the actions and more about who we are.
As we cultivate these practices, we slowly shed the layers of conditioning, those veils that keep us from experiencing our true nature, the divine light that's inside each of us.
It's like polishing a diamond, smoothing out the rough edges, revealing the brilliance that was always there, just hidden.
The veils of ego, attachment, and negativity dissolve, and the divine light shines through more and more.
So it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who we really are, uncovering that goodness, that divine spark within us.
And remember, it's a journey of continuous unveiling. There's always more to discover, more to purify, more to let go of, more to understand about ourselves and reality. It's a lifelong process of growth, transformation, and deepening our connection with the divine.
So it's not about reaching a destination, but about the direction we're heading. It's about moving towards the light, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time.
Approach this path with humility, with patience, and with an open heart. Be ready to receive the guidance and grace that Allah gives to those who truly seek Him.
It's about being kind to ourselves, knowing we're all works in progress and trusting the process, knowing that every step towards the divine is a step towards our own wholeness.
The secret of secrets is a light that guides us towards spiritual awakening. May its wisdom guide us, inspire us, and bring us closer to the divine presence that's within each of us.
Beautifully said. It reminds us that this journey is worth it, the effort is worth it, and the rewards are immeasurable. To everyone listening, may your path be filled with ease, joy, and the light of divine grace. May this deep dive inspire you to start your own journey of self-discovery, to unlock the secrets within your heart, and to experience the limitless love and mercy that's waiting for you.